Good morning. My name is Gillian Balaban and I am Senior Coordinator Governance Relations at GRI. Welcome to this meeting of the Global Sustainability Standards Board, known by its acronym the GSSB, held on 14 December 2023. This virtual meeting is being hosted from Amsterdam, the Netherlands. Please note that all public GSSB meetings are being recorded, and you can find the audio recording on the GSSB webpage along with the high-level summaries of previous GSSB meetings. Present from the GRI Secretariat today are Bastien Buck, Chief of Standards, Elodie Cheney, Senior Manager Standards, Harold Powell, Director of Standards, Miguel Perez-Udena, Research Lead, and Nora Puro, Senior Manager Sector Standards. We'll now start with a roll call. Anna Nefedova.
Hello, present.
Morning. Corley LaRue.
Good morning, present.
Chalanja de Silva.
Present.
Galia Tsenkova.
Present.
Julia Genuadi.
Present.
Jeff Robertson.
Present.
Jennifer Prinsing.
Present.
Laura Dana Carter.
Present.
Peter Carlili.
Present.
Vincent Kong.
Present.
And GSSB Chair Carol Adams.
Present.
Thank you, everyone. GSSB member Deborah Ung sent her apology, and GSSB members Ganga Charan Sharma, Joseph Martin, and Kim Schumacher will join shortly. Kim has just joined the call. Good morning, Kim. We'll come back to him. I will now hand over to the Chair, Carol Adams, to open the meeting.
Thank you very much, Gillian, and welcome everybody. Nice to see you all again. The first item on our agenda is to approve the minutes of our last meeting in November. Are there any comments on those minutes? No. Okay, well, hearing none, we'll take those minutes as approved and then move on to the update from the Standards Division from, oh no, sorry, we won't do that. We will thank our members rolling off the GSSB for their service. Thank you very much to Vincent Kong, to Joseph Martin, and to Kim Schumacher. We've very much appreciated your input to the GSSB and the hard work that has involved and the time that's involved too. Thank you very much. So next we'll move on to the update from the Standards Division, and I'll hand over to Bastien, Chief Standards Officer, to give a brief update on the standards. And I wonder, Bastien, is there any reason why we couldn't have this update as a paper next time? You're on mute, by the way. We can't hear you.
As we discussed at the in-person meeting from 24 onwards, the updates on the projects will be provided with the meeting papers in advance of the meeting, and won't repeat that. But also today we keep it very, very short because of positive news. Both projects that we are looking at in the update running as per schedule and earlier discussed. We are implementing those projects in the way that we've previewed you. What I would like to highlight in the update very briefly is actually 2 slides further. We have recently issued after a tremendous amount of work across the whole of GRI, both in terms of reaching an agreement with EFRAG through an MOU, as well as the technical and political work needed to agree an interoperability table or index. We have now issued this content in draft form on the respective websites, and as this has been a frequent reference in our discussions, I felt it was important to note that. And in conjunction with that, if we flip a couple of slides further, we've also recently issued, in light of the one more slide, sorry, actually two more. Please go ahead. No, one more. Yes. We've also issued a comparison of our exposure draft for the climate change standard and the energy topic standard with the established other reporting frameworks and instruments like the TCFD. We've discussed that earlier, that it's very important for GRI to demonstrate the complementarity and additionality of our work, but also to always present new proposals in context of the wider reporting landscape and the instruments that exist around us already. And this is a first effort, and we will look to replicate this across more of the initiatives that will see daylight, both the launches as well as the exposure drafts. All of this is in a meeting pack, and I'll stop here and ask Carol to proceed with the meeting. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Bastian. I think those are excellent pieces of work, and I know they are time-consuming also. So thank you very much to all involved. Does anybody have any comments on any of the things that Bastian has touched on? Okay, so then we can go on to the biodiversity standard. And Elodie is going to introduce this.
Yes, and thank you, Carol. And hello, everyone. I hope you can hear me well. So yes, we have shared with the GSSB the final draft of the revised biodiversity standard. So this is item 2 in your pack, as well as the draft basis for conclusion in item 3. And today, you'll see on the next slide, there are 3 approvals that we want to go through with you on whether the GSSB resolves to approve the final draft of the biodiversity standard, whether it approves that re-exposure of the draft standard is not needed, and whether it resolves to approve the withdrawal of GRI 304. So in this session, so if we can move on to the next slide, please, Jill, we will provide an overview of the development and engagement process, any issue raised by the GSSB during the review of the final draft, and the proposals of the standards division to address them, the effective date that we propose for the new standards, any implications on other standards, as well as any other questions that the GSSB may have on the draft or the draft basis for conclusion, before going through the due process steps and the scheduled approval. And at the end, we'll provide a short overview on the next steps. Next slide, please. So the revision of the biodiversity standard started in September 2021 when the GSSB approved the project proposal. I won't detail all the development steps as we've provided updates to the GSSB during the project or throughout the project, but I'll focus on the final 2 stages of the project development today. So after the public comment period ended on the end of February, the project team spent some time analyzing the comments received. There were 122 public submissions, and we engaged with the Biodiversity Technical Committee to revise the content of the standards. So we had a series of 3 workshops with them to discuss the public comment feedback, and then an additional 3 meetings to discuss the revisions to the draft. So the public comment, the first public comment period led to the re-exposure of one of the disclosure on access and benefit sharing, as a full rewriting of the content was needed to address the feedback received. And then following the revision of the draft standard, the document also went through internal technical and editorial reviews in the standards division to ensure the consistency with the broader set of GRI standards. And now we have shared with you the final draft along the basis or the draft basis for conclusion for discussion today. And also to note, also echoing what Bastien mentioned, is that we had also an extensive update on the due process with the DPOC, the Due Process Oversight Committee last week, and provided that approvals go through today, we will also seek final approval of the DPOC on adherence to the due process in January. And then we'll expect to release the standard and launch in late January. On the next slide, then you see the summary of the content in the final standard, or in the final draft of the standard. It comprises 8 disclosures, and that includes 3 topic management disclosures and 5 topic disclosures, which you see listed here on the slide. So you were given the opportunity to provide comments on this draft standard ahead of today's meeting. We have responded to all feedback received in writing by email, and today we will go through the feedback received for which we would like to propose some adjustments to the final draft in order to address your comments. And then if you have any additional comments or questions, or if you'd like to reiterate some of the feedback provided in writing that we haven't covered verbally today, you can also do that at the end of the session. So on the next slide, we will go through that feedback now. So one GSSB member pointed out that the term operational site is often used throughout the draft. It's defined in line 676 to 679 in the guidance for 101-4, disclosure 101-4. And the definition also includes site for which future operations have been announced but not yet started, as well as those no longer active. So this member pointed out that it seems to cover all possible state of the site, not just operational. Also, companies routinely make the distinction between operating, non-operating site and operating assets and non-operating assets. And also it's obvious that non-operational site needs to be considered. The word operational might lead to confusion among reporters, and that it may also not be consistent with the mining sector or the final draft of the mining sector that do not use the term operational as well. So I think the suggestion of the GSSB member was to either remove the qualifier operational or to include the term in the glossary to make it more prominent. So on the next slide, you'll see, so we indeed the term operational site originated from the current GRI 304, which we kept, but of course through the round of revisions and discussion with the technical committee, they recommended included sites that are no longer in operations as part of the definition, but the term itself was indeed not revised. So if you check, it's also the case that the EFRAG standard, the ESRS-D4 on biodiversity and ecosystem services, and the TNFT also use the term site, but do not specify operational. So in light of this, and so to respond to the comment from the GSSB member, the standards division proposes to remove the word operational in all instances in the standard and refer to site only. And here on the slide, you will see how the guidance that defines site would look like. We would also slightly amend so the term, the example where we refer to mining site and change it to mine site as well for greater consistency with the mining sector standard. So I'll give you a few seconds to read through. If you have any objections, please raise your concern. You can also show support through the chat function if you'd like. give you a few seconds in case there are anything you'd like to raise here. And hearing none. Yes, Carol?
Yeah, I think you can just move on, Elodie, and we'll give some time at the end also in case there are any afterthought concerns.
Very clear. And then on the next slide, there was another comment concerning the same paragraph, and it's an editorial issue where the example was duplicated by mistake. So we will remove the additional sentence, and you'll have seen on the slide before how the final guidance would look like then for this section. Again, this is fairly straightforward, so we can move to the next slide. Another comment was received about the fact that the requirement to provide site coordinates under disclosure 101-5 was removed after the public comment period. So this GSSB member raised several issues, including that the guidance may not be consistent with the requirement, that it may not be possible to check the veracity of information provided if the coordinates are not known, and that it is not consistent with the mining standard. And this member also suggested that the use of reasons for omission should be used instead. So if we move to the next slide, in response to that, the standards division would like to know that the use of reason for omissions was the approach taken during the public comment period or during the development of the exposure draft. The feedback received during the public comment period still indicated some strong concerns about the confidentiality of this data. And we know that's something that can be debated, but that's the feedback that we received. And currently, the guidance recommends providing the locations in terms of polygons, outlines, or map, and also they may be less accurate than exact coordinates. These can already show quite precisely the location of an organization site and if they are located in sensitive areas. And currently, indeed, the reporting of the site's coordinate is only has been changed to a reporting option. In the final draft of the mining sector standard, there is an additional sector disclosure to report the coordinates, but just to know that it is only also a recommendation, that is not a requirement. And also it's, I would say, difficult to know whether this practice that would be relevant for one sector can be generalized to all reporting organizations, given also the feedback that we received. And again, looking at what is done in other standards or framework, we know that the EFRAG has not included the coordinate of sites in the biodiversity standard for the same reasons. It's also not included in the TNFD recommendation. So given that the requirement in the exposure draft was changed to only a reporting option in the final draft, and in response, again, of the GSSB comment, we propose to strengthen this option to a recommendation instead to ensure greater consistency with GRI 14. So then we will have recommendations on both standards, pointing out that also it would not be required. It would be a strong expectation for reporters to provide that information if they have it. So the guidance then in line 838 to 839 in item 2 would then read, if available, the organization should also report the names and coordinate of its site. So again, I see some nodding from the person who provided that comment. So unless there are any other, people want to make a comment, we can move on to the next slide. It's fine. So going through the next comment, one GSSB member indicated that in the standard, it could be clearer that each impact, such as land use change, water pollution, etc., is a separate one, and that we cannot aggregate when defining targets. So, for instance, that in one operational site, the impact is land use, while in another operational site, the impact would be water pollution, for example. So this is something that we had covered in the guidance, and you can see that on line 951 to 955 in item 2. But admittedly, there's been several editorial changes in that section of the text, with content that had been added and removed and changed, and resulting perhaps in guidance that is not as clear as it could be. So we are proposing here to clarify as per the edit suggested on the slide. So I'll let you read. I can maybe read it aloud quickly, so for people listening in. But then the section would be, the organization needs to report only the information for the direct drivers relevant to its activities and its supply chain. Direct drivers can vary by location. For example, an organization has activities that lead to pollution in site A. The same organization has activities in another site B, responsible for exploiting natural resources. In this case, the organization only needs to report the information on pollution for site A and on the exploitation of natural resources for site B. So I think, again, it's fairly straightforward, and it also helps to clarify the content. So yes, we can move to the next slide. And to let you know as well that we shared the final draft with a couple of frameworks that are often referred to in the standards to ensure that they are comfortable with how we refer to them or to their guidance. And there are two comments from the TNFD that we would like to run by you. First, under disclosure 101-4 in box 1, they indicated that both the locate and evaluate phases of the LEAP approach can be used to identify most significant impact. So in the final draft, we refer to only the evaluate phase to identify most significant impact, and we refer to the locate phase for locating where impact are most likely to be present and significant. So here we would like, we propose to take the recommendation on board and amend the guidance as proposed on the slide. So on line 778, the guidance will read the locate and evaluate phases of the TNFD LEAP approach. So that's part of the tools or references that we provide for more guidance on how to identify biodiversity impact. So the second last proposed change on the next slide is also from the TNFD. So we align with the TNFD categories of ecologically sensitive areas. In the TNFD framework, one of them is named areas important for the delivery of ecosystem service benefits to indigenous peoples, local communities, and stakeholders. So in the final draft that you've read, we simplified and removed the reference to indigenous people and local communities. They are stakeholders to the organization. But the TNFD also pointed out the difference in language. So given the importance of biodiversity for these stakeholders, and also to ensure alignment in language so that we avoid confusion for reporters as to whether we are fully aligned or if there may be some distinction between GRI and TNFD, we propose to fully align the language and just add the word other before stakeholders so that we do not suggest that indigenous peoples and local communities are not stakeholders to the organization. So then we would be referring to areas important for the delivery of ecosystem service benefits to indigenous peoples, local communities, and other stakeholders. I think it's fine. And then the final edits that we would like to propose. So this one is, we are proposing it. It relates to the wording in the requirements in disclosure 101-6, direct drivers of biodiversity loss. So here again, we made several changes throughout the development of the draft to clarify the requirements. But one thing that was overlooked in the final stages is that the language currently only cover the actual impacts and not the potential impacts. Unlike, for instance, what we have in disclosure 101-7 that covers ecosystems that are affected or potentially affected. So we would like to rectify this and add the words could lead to in the requirement A to D in this disclosure. So then the organization will have to report for each operational site reported under 101-5-A, where its activities lead or could lead to a certain driver, report the relevant information for that drivers. And that would be reflected also in the guidance of 101-4 for consistency purposes, where we have a similar reference. So this is all the changes that we would like to propose in these final stages. So if we can move to the next slide. So this, if approved, we would like to propose an effective date of the 1st of January 2026. So for the GRI 101 biodiversity. So that was about a transition period of 2 years. So for a reporter to transition from GRI 304 to GRI 101. And acknowledging that those are ambitious revisions that we are proposing in this standard, we think that this longer transition period would give reporters sufficient time to incorporate GRI 101 in their reporting processes. It is aligned with the proposed effective date for the mining sector standard. And as usual, earlier adoption would be encouraged. In the next slide, please. So if in terms of implications on other GRI standards, so if GRI 101 is approved today, this will have implication for the 2016 biodiversity standard, so the GRI 304. This topic standard would then be superseded as its content have been revised and expanded in GRI 101. So here the standards division recommend that the GRI 304 biodiversity 2016 is withdrawn when GRI 101 comes into effect. And if we can move on to the next slide. So yes, here I'd like to pause and ask the GSSB if there are any other comments or questions on the final biodiversity standard. So that's item 2, or the draft basis for conclusion. That's item 3 in your pack you have. And as a reminder, note that the basis for conclusions is a document explaining how the GSSB considered and responded to significant issues raised in the public comment. In line with the due process, the basis for conclusions is not subject to voting approval by the GSSB. It is a non-authoritative document, which does not constitute part of the final standard. However, it is to be retained for an indefinite period on the GSSB website. So if you do have any comment that you'd like us to incorporate before it's published, we can still do that after this meeting. And all comments that we've received ahead of the meeting on the basis for conclusion will be incorporated as well.
Thank you, Elodie, and thank you everybody on the GSSB for submitting your comments. Is everybody happy with the way their own comments and those of others who have been dealt with? Chalendra.
Thanks, Carol. Elodie, thanks for the update. I just had a clarification on row 532, which talks about the offsets. The language goes with regard to an offset aims to deliver or contribute to no net loss or net gain goals for an operational site. Now, at least in this part of the world, there can be instances, Elodie, where the offset can happen outside the operational site. In the sense, the impact can be in the operational site, but the offset initiative is done outside. Does that wording limit the reporter from reporting of what he does outside? Is the question I had.
No, so that we explained earlier in the guidance, and I need to find the line, I can put that on the chat after that. Indeed, offsets are actions taken outside of an operational site to manage or the residual impact that an organization has on the site. So that has been defined clearly in the guidance. Here is this guidance is relating to the goals of an offset and to indicate that an offset can contribute to different, let's say, aspects. So they can be indeed to make sure that one operational site become, I don't know, net loss or net gain in terms of its impact on biodiversity, but sometimes the offset can focus on restoring a particular species, or so that's to indicate a different type of goals that an offset can have. It doesn't preclude activities outside of the site because indeed, I think it's in line 489, we explained that offsets are management intervention in area not affected by the organization's activities. So those are activities that happen outside of an operational site by definition.
Thanks, Elodie.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Okay, I'll take it that everybody is happy with that then. And if we could, Ganga, hi. And if we could move on to the next slide, please. Thank you. Bastian, did you want to speak to this before we do the approval?
Yes, I can briefly explain this. So there are 4 steps that are required before a GI standard can be approved. It's on me to advise the GSSB whether due process has been followed. And then Carol, as the chair, calls for a vote. And we also have to establish on public record whether, by vote, whether there are any significant changes that would require re-exposure, and close this off with a vote that resolves to approve to withdraw the existing, in this case, the GI 304 biodiversity to 2016 standard, and replace it by the new standard. So these are the things that we have to go through based on the due process protocol, and we have a script for this, Carol and I, which we'll move through together with you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so Bastian, what is your view on whether the due process has been met on the development of GRI 101 biodiversity?
So for the GI 101 biodiversity, the topic standard that we have been discussing today, we've moved through the following steps: the project identification and prioritization, project commencement, appointment of technical committee or project working group, development of proposed standard, the public exposure, importantly, the consideration of respondents' comments, including also the interaction with the GI board and the stakeholder council. And from the standards division perspective, I can confirm that due process has been followed for all the steps outlined in the due process protocol.
Thank you very much, Bastian, and thank you to the team involved. Can I ask GSSB members to vote if they agree that this standard should be approved, subject to the changes that Elodie has outlined today, with an effective date of 1st of January 2026. I'm going to pass over to Gillian now to handle the approval.
Thank you, Carol. May I ask if you approve the standard? I will go through the roll call. Anna Nefedova.
Approve.
Thank you. Carol Adams.
Approved.
Chalendra De Silva.
Approved.
Corley LaRue.
I approve.
Deborah has already approved. Galia Tonsankova. We'll come back to Galia. Gangacharan Sharma.
Approved.
Julie Genuadi.
Approve.
Jeff Robertson.
I approve.
Jennifer Prinsing.
Approve.
Kim Schumacher.
I approve.
Thank you. Laura Dana Carter. Peter Colley.
I approve.
Vincent Kong.
I approve.
Thank you. May I go back to Galia Tisankova?
Approved.
Thank you, Galia. And it is approved by all the members. Carol.
Thank you very much, Gillian. So the next thing we have to do is consider the need for re-exposure. So Bastian, are there any significant changes that between the exposure draft and the final approved standard that require re-exposure?
I will keep it very brief. There are no significant changes that would require re-exposure at this stage.
Thank you. So could I ask GSSB members to vote if they agree that this standard should be issued as a final standard without re-exposure? Pass over to Jill.
Thank you, Carol. We'll go through the roll call again. Anna Nefedova.
I approve.
Thank you. Carol Adams.
Yes, I agree.
Chilunji de Silva.
Agreed.
Cordy LaRue.
Agreed.
Deborah Ing has already approved. Galia Tisankova.
Agreed.
Ganka Charan Sharma.
I agree.
Julia Genuadi.
Agreed.
Jeff Robertson.
Agreed.
Jennifer Prinsing.
Agreed.
Kim Schumacher.
Agreed.
Thank you. Laura Dana Carter. And Peter Colley.
Agreed.
And Vincent Kong.
Agreed.
Thank you all. Again, Carol, it's been approved by all members.
Thank you very much. That's fantastic. So I now have to ask GSSB members to vote if they agree to withdraw the 2016 version of this standard, GRI 304 biodiversity, by the 31st of December 2025. I assume you're all going to, given that we've approved a new one, and we don't want to. But Jill, we'll hand over to you, and we'll go through the process.
Thank you. I'll do the roll call again. Anna Nefedova.
Yes, agreed.
Thank you. Carol Adams.
Agreed.
Chilunji de Silva.
Agreed.
Cordy LaRue.
Agreed.
Deborah Ing has already agreed. Galia Tisankova.
Agreed.
Ganka Charan Sharma.
I agree.
Julia Genuadi.
Agreed.
Jeff Robertson.
Agreed.
Jennifer Prinsing.
Agreed.
Kim Schumacher.
Agreed.
Laura Dana Carter. We'll come back to Laura. Laura Dana.
Agreed.
Thank you. Peter Colley.
Agreed.
And Vincent Kong.
Agreed.
Thank you all again. All members have approved.
Thank you very much indeed, everyone. And so if we could move to the next slide, please. Who's going to talk us through the next steps?
I can give you a brief overview of the next steps. And thank you very much for those approvals, first of all. It's great news for us. And then now that it's approved, we're proposing to, as you know, that first of all, we'll go back to the DPOC for a final approval in mid-January. And after that, we propose to launch very soon after, at the end of the month of January next year, the 31st of January, hopefully. And to give you an overview of the activities that we are planning for the launch. So there will be webinars, so globally and also with our regional networks to present updates on the biodiversity, to present the final biodiversity standards. There are also a suite of knowledge and training products that are developed, and in particular, a GRI Academy training course that is scheduled to be released end of February. As I mentioned, given the ambition of the revision, we are thinking of piloting as well a new standard with early adopters. And there will also be a suite of communication materials such as FAQs and others to support as well the communication campaign and the uptake of the standards. So we can provide in the coming months a more detailed overview of those activities to the GSSB. And before I hand over to you and close that presentation, I would also like to take a minute to publicly thank a few people, if that's okay. And in particular, I'd like to extend the Standards Division thanks to the Biodiversity Technical Committee who has supported that project for the past 2 years. So it's been also a big commitment from their part. And we are very grateful for their inputs and their comments. And also to thank all who provided feedback along the way through the peer reviews, through the public comment, including through the GSSB in this final review. That's really helpful, and that really makes the standard very strong in the end. And also I'd like to thank all the people in the Standards Division who have contributed. So there are too many to name them all, but I'd like to acknowledge the core project team, in no particular order. Easy and so Matthew Dunn, Nasteha Elias, Paul Ho, Mahima Pudel, Tamar Zylstra, Sharon Hagen, and Harold Powells. So not all of them were involved at the same time in the project, and not for the entirety of the project. I think otherwise we would have been able to submit the final standard much sooner. But as you know, the team grew over the past couple of years. So several people contributed to the project as they started before rotating off to other projects. But that means a lot of people. It's been a great team effort throughout. And that's it. I'll leave it as that, and I can hand it over back to you, Carol. Thanks a lot again.
Well, thank you very much indeed, everybody. And we did indeed have some real experts wanting to work with us in a voluntary capacity on the technical expert group. So that is, it's good to be able to attract such high caliber people. And certainly very happy with the outcome, the output of all of that. So thank you to everyone. I really did like the way with the launch of the climate change standard that the team there involved some GSSB members. I couldn't listen to all the presentations because of the time zone difference, but I did hear Anna's and I thought it was excellent. And it was really good to see GSSB members involved in that. So hopefully there'll be some interest in doing that again. Thank you. So if we could move on to the next slide, please. And I think that brings us to the next item, the approval of the mining standard. And I'll pass over to Noura for that.
Thank you very much, Carol, and hopefully you can all hear me well. Good morning to all GSSB members from the Netherlands and all listeners online. My name is Noura Puro. I'm the project lead for the mining sector standard, and I'm pleased to be here today to seek the board's approval for the final mining standard. So you have all received the relevant documentation beforehand, namely the final sector standard, which is item 4, the draft basis for conclusions, item 5, which summarizes the changes implemented to the final standard after the public comment period and how the feedback from the public was addressed. You have also received item 6, which contains inputs to GRI topic and universal standards as a result of working group and public comment feedback across the project timeline. If we could move on to the next slide, please, Jill. So this session will include 2 approvals. So approving the final standard, item 4, and resolving to approve that re-exposure is not needed. There will be no standards that will need to be replaced, so that third approval will be not necessary. And the session will follow a similar structure as Elodie's presentation on biodiversity. So after a brief update on the project activities during the past few months since we last got to speak with each other, I will go through the major feedback items submitted by the GSSB members ahead of the session. For comments related to editorial matters or more minor issues, we have provided responses in writing by email, which the member has agreed was satisfied with. Following that, we will pause for any further questions and discussion with the GSSB and move on to the effective date. And Bastian and Carol will then go through the formal steps for approval. So the next slide, we have the familiar timeline you've seen many, many times, and perhaps for the last time today for this project, as we have now moved on to the final phase of the standard development, approval, and publication. So since September, when I last presented the outcomes of the public consultation to the GSSB, the team has been implementing revisions to the draft contents based on working group recommendations. So after the public comment period, where we received 93 formal submissions to the exposure draft, the working group got together 4 more times, including 2 full days in person in Amsterdam. The working group has reviewed the revised draft in full in September, and thereafter it has undergone technical and editorial reviews in the standards division. A final working group review was concluded in November, with no members opposing the submission of the final draft contents to the GSSB. The resulting final draft, along with the basis for conclusions, was shared with the GSSB on November 24th, and the approval discussion is naturally taking place as we speak. And we can look at the next steps a little later on the presentation once we have secured the approval of the board, but with the same idea that DPOC approval would be expected in January and launch in February then. Moving on to the feedback from the GSSB. The first and the most significant feedback point, as stated by the GSSB member himself, is related to the reporting model of the sector standards. So not strictly a content issue in the standard, but important to address nevertheless with the full board present. So the concern was specifically related to the lack of mandatory reporting for sector-specific disclosures and the lack of requirement to report reasons for omission for these disclosures. And this is especially problematic in cases like presented as an example by the GSSB member for topics where we don't have a dedicated topic standard. The example was raised as the topic tailings. So this issue holds significant importance in the mining sector, which is reflected also in the extensive additional sector disclosures outlined in the sector standard. However, as these additional disclosures aren't mandated, only the management disclosure, disclosure 3.3, needs to be reported for topics without a dedicated topic standard. This creates a potential gap in reporting, which is particularly concerning for a high impact area like tailings. And the member requested for clarification on where and how the decision was made regarding the status of additional sector disclosures and recommendations and the absence of requirements for reasons for omission. So I will respond to that question, but as it is fairly technical, I would first like to go just a few slides to quickly remind the GSSB over the mechanism with which the sector standards are intended to be used to be in accordance with the GRI standards to ensure that everyone has the same level of information when going into this discussion. So on the next slide, we have a screenshot from GRI1 Foundation, where you can find 9 requirements to fulfill to be in accordance with the GRI standards. And the GSSB members' comment is particularly relevant to requirements 3, determining material topics, and requirement 5, reporting disclosures from the GRI topic standards for each material topic. So starting with requirement 3, you can move on to the next slide, please. This necessitates companies to use any and all applicable sector standards in the materiality process. The sector standards give cues on the most important impacts relevant for organizations in the sector, helping out in the materiality assessment. The likely material topics, the list of likely material topics, also has a degree of accountability attached to it. So namely, if any of the topics listed in an applicable sector standard is found by the reporting organization as not material, then the organization is required to list them in the GRI content index and explain why they are not material. So this gives an additional lens of transparency for information users to know why they are not reporting specific topics. Requirement 5, the sector standard also sets out which disclosures are relevant to report for a company in a given sector on each material topic. And Jill, if you could move us to the next slide, please. Thank you. The requirement 5 GSSB specifies that an organization needs to report the GRI topic standards listed in a sector standard or provide the not applicable reason for omission if any of the topic disclosures are not relevant to its impacts. So you will notice that only topic standards disclosures are mandatory reporting in this in accordance model. However, if you look at the guidance, it specifies that an organization should provide sufficient information about its impacts in relation to each material topic so that information users can make informed assessments and decisions about the organization. And importantly, if the disclosures from the topic standards do not provide sufficient information about the organization's impacts, the organization should report additional disclosures. And these can include the additional sector disclosures recommended in the sector standards. It is thus a strong recommendation to report these additional disclosures should the topic disclosures not be sufficient to represent the organization's impacts. So this is the background how it's represented in GRI 1 as pointed out by the GSSB member. And then moving on to how and when the decision was made. The next slide, a couple of points on this. So the reporting model was discussed in the GSSB meeting in March 23rd, 2021. And as you may remember, the first sector standard pilot project for oil and gas was running simultaneously as the revision of the universal standards, where the sector standards were first introduced to the GRI standards system. And in this meeting, revisions were presented to the GSSB to clarify the use of the sector standards as a result of feedback collected via the public comment period. Based on this feedback and consultations internally, it was deemed that the main focus of a sector standard project was not to develop disclosures as such. These disclosures would not necessarily hold the same rigor as topic disclosures. For example, they don't have any guidance attached to them, and the working groups for sector standards are also not expected to have the same level of deep knowledge and expertise on every topic included in a sector standard. We are talking about 20 plus topics for all the sector standards that we have so far, after all. As a group dedicated to a topic standard would have. And at that point, without having a single sector standard approved or in place, the standards
I just lost Noor.
Yep, same here.
Yeah, I think there is a technical issue. Let me try. This is probably the internet connection. We will try to get her back online in a moment.
Yeah, we'll try for a while and then maybe someone else will have to take over if not.
What I can do in the meanwhile is close out the discussion on the reporting model, and then hopefully Nora will join us back online any second. So what we wanted to leave with you is the acknowledgement that a further discussion of the reporting model is something that was envisioned all along. We said at the time that there will be the work on the pilot, the first 3 standards, and also mining has started during that first phase of the sector program, and we would consolidate also first evidence from application. We've made a first step in that regard with looking at the application of the oil and gas sector standard, that we will investigate the application of the sector standards, and on the back of this return to the discussion on the reporting model. At this point in time, we're confirming the approach that is in existence already for the 3 approved sector standards, and we propose to have a discussion in the coming year to review all the evidence that we can produce on the application of the sector standards as they have been formulated thus far. So no change at this point in time, acknowledging that further discussions are needed, and we are able to move this discussion with further research together with you when we review the sector program and the public, the pilot program feedback. Checking with. Yeah, wonderful. So maybe, Nora, we can move to the next point then, past the reporting model and to the individual feedback items, also looking at time. Just a housekeeping item here. Kim has notified us that he will have to drop off the call shortly. So we're moving this swiftly through the feedback that he has the benefit of also seeing all the answers or responses of the standards division.
Perfect. Thank you, Bastian. Apologies for this. We have some workmen downstairs and internet cut off for a little bit. GSSB member expressed disappointment over the removal of the disclosure recommendation to 401(2). So reporting benefits provided to employees that are not provided to workers who are not employees, whose workplace is controlled by the organization. And in more simple terms, this deals with benefits that would be awarded to employees in direct employment versus contractors. This is, as pointed out by the GSSB member, a pertinent issue for the mining sector. However, in negotiation with the working group and the labor project team, this disclosure was deemed as one that will likely be addressed by the ongoing revision of the labor standards, as it is not but applies to many industries. This feedback has been recorded in the input report submitted to the team, and discussions with the labor team indicate that this is already on the radar for the draft disclosures on working time and social protection and distribution of financial and non-financial benefits. Moving on to the next slide. This feedback is related to the topic freedom of association and collective bargaining, where a new disclosure was introduced, sector recommendation, to report the number of strikes and lockouts involving 1,000 or more workers lasting one shift, full shift or longer, and their total duration. The member raised concerns that this information could be used by anti-union investors to blacklist organizations, and that's also not always a possibility for workers. Thus, their absence of strikes would not necessarily be an indicator of good business behavior. The original proposal was indeed through the public comment period by a ratings agency. And the issue was brought to the working group, and the concerns about anti-union sentiments were shared with the group, as this was also on the table for the sector standards for oil and gas and coal. However, after discussions, the working group did support the inclusion with agreement across the aisles from civil society, labor, and investor representatives. Their argument was that together with data reported in GRI2 on collective bargaining, this can provide a useful picture of whether there are underlying problems with the company. And this was also supported by additional research we made, other multi-stakeholder developed responsible mining initiatives, for example, in the Responsible Mining Index. Strikes are also raised as a good indicator. It was also not seen as particularly adding to the reporting burden by business members, as it is
I think somebody else will have to take over here.
Can you hear me?
We can now.
Yes,
Okay.
you're back. Yes.
Okay.
So the connection keeps dropping. Maybe what you can do is switch off the video, because it seems to be also a bandwidth issue. Not only that it's cutting out completely, but also a bandwidth issue. And continue. We just lost the very last remark, I think, on that we weren't able to listen to on this point.
Okay. The final point was related to the business members not seeing this as particularly adding to the reporting burden, as it is also included in the SASB standard for metals and mining. We can move on to the next slide, and this is the final feedback item. In the topic economic impacts, the recommendation was there was a recommendation in the exposure draft to disaggregate the information reported in disclosure 201.1, economic value generated and distributed by mine site. And in the final draft, this was downsized to only recommending reporting community investments by mine site. So this is one of the economic value metrics required in 201.1. And this was seen as a very relevant figure by the working group to know per mine site, whereas the other data points would be sufficient at country, regional, or market levels, as is already specified in requirement in 23, payments to governments, which includes a sector recommendation to disclosure 207.4, country by country reporting, specifying a breakdown of the taxes and other payments to government levied at the project level, by project, and by material revenue stream. And this disclosure is aligned with the EITI standard 2023. Then if we move on to the effective date, before pausing for any further questions. So the Standards Division proposes 1st of January 2026 as the effective date for the mining sector standard. Taking into consideration that this is a new model of reporting for mining companies with significant reporting expectations, both in terms of listed required disclosures and the recommended mine site reporting, a longer transition period was seen as justified. In addition, as you've noticed, the mining standard also incorporates the revised biodiversity disclosures. To maintain congruence across the standards and avoid confusion, both the biodiversity and mining standards have the same effective date. This will also allow time for reporters in non-English speaking countries to have translation in place and still be able to comply with the effective date. And as always, earlier adoption is possible and encouraged. So next slide, any further comments or discussion? I'll move on. I'll hand over to Carol.
Thank you very much, Nora. Good presentation. Peter had his hand up.
Yes, I'll out myself as the person who's raised all the comments that have been discussed in the mining sector one, plus a fair few of the biodiversity ones too. It was good to hear Bastian say that this issue of the strength of the mining sector, of the sector, additional sector disclosures will be revisited, because I think it is where we are now. We've got a situation where a lot of good work has been put into additional sector disclosures in the sector standards, and it's they are clearly not as strong if they are simply recommendations and there's no reasons for omission required. So I think it will be good if we can come back to that in the future. On the other issues, particularly benefits to workers who are not employees and value added by site. I'm okay with where we've reached. I would like a bit more, but then everyone likes a bit more. So I will. I'm happy to endorse the standard as it stands after these responses. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. I mean, I'm glad you raised those questions of the standards structure. I do think it's a matter of maturity, but it also, to me, really underscores the importance of the GRI 3 process, that is conducted with rigor, and also really the importance of that being externally assured. Did you want to add anything, Bastian or Nora?
Nothing to add from my side. No. I think we can take the action and record that in the minutes that we will revisit this issue.
Yeah, thank you. Any other comments from GSSB members? Okay, thank you. If we could move on then, please, to the approval. So, Bastian, what is your view on whether due process has been met on the development of the GRI 14 mining standard?
So for the sector standard that we're looking at here, we've moved through all the required steps: the project identification, prioritization, project commencement, appointment of the working group, the development of proposed standard, public exposure, consideration of the comments, importantly, the interactions with the GRI board and stakeholder council as required. And from the standards division perspective, I can confirm that due process has been followed for these steps.
Thank you. So can I ask GSSB members to vote if they agree that this standard should be approved, subject to any changes agreed today, with an effective date of 1st of January 2026? And I'll ask Gillian to do the roll call on that, please.
Thank you, Carol. I'll start with the roll call. Anna Nefedova.
I approve.
Carol Adams.
I approve.
Chalanja de Silva.
Approved.
Cordy LeRoux.
I approve.
Deborah Inc has approved. Galia Tsankova.
Approved.
Ganga Charan Sharma.
I agree.
Julia Genuardi.
I approve.
Jeff Robertson.
I approve.
Jennifer Printing.
Approve.
Kim Schumacher has just approved. Laura Dana Carter. I'll come back to Laura Dana. Peter Colley.
Approve.
Vincent Kong.
Approved.
And Laura Dana Carter. We'll come back to Laura Dana. All the other members have approved.
Thank you very much, Gillian. So now, Bastian, are there any significant changes between the exposure draft and the final approved standard that require re-exposure?
No, I can confirm that there are no significant changes that would require re-exposure at this point in time.
Thank you. So can I ask GSSB members to vote if they agree that this standard should be issued as final without re-exposure? Over to Gillian.
Thank you, Carol. I'll do the roll call. Anna Nefedova.
I agree.
Carol Adams.
I agree.
Chalanja de Silva.
I agree.
Cordy LeRoux.
I agree.
Deborah Inc has approved. Galia Chisenkova.
I agree.
Ganga Charan Sharma.
I agree.
Julia Genuardi.
I agree.
Jeff Robertson.
I agree.
Jennifer Printing.
I agree.
Kim Schumacher has already approved. Peter Colley.
I approve.
And Vincent Kong.
I agree.
Laura Dana has fallen out. She's just rejoining. Laura Dana, do you approve the new? Do you approve the new standard?
I approve the new standard.
And do you approve re-exposure is not needed?
I agree.
Thank you.
For dropping off.
No problem. All members have approved, Carol.
Thank you very much, everybody, and thank you, Gillian. And that takes us to the next slide.
Thank you very much, Carol, and the whole board. And I can tell you that this makes one very happy project manager here, hearing this. And just a couple of words on the next steps. We will delve into this a little bit deeper in the January meeting next year. But we are currently aiming to launch on the 8th of February in Cape Town during a major mining conference, Mining in Daba. And as there is a big overlap between impacts from mining and biodiversity,
Okay, we have lost her again. Is there someone else who could just finish off this piece on the next steps?
Yes, I can do that. So we will be in touch with more information on the launch proceedings. What is currently scheduled is what you have on this slide, and we're working with the whole organization to bring about supporting contents for the launch moment, and then look also at the launch planning across the different networks, regions, and constituencies.
Many thanks. It's great to hear of that whole of organization approach to that. Thank you. And now if we could move on then to the alignment of topic and sector standards with Miguel.
Hello, Carol. Can you see me? Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Carry on. Well, nice to see you.
Hello, good morning. It has been a very productive GSSB meeting already, so I promise to be brief. This is item 7 in your documentation, the final project proposal on the alignment of sector standards with new and revised topic standards. You have approved the draft proposal in the meeting of September. In the meantime, following due process protocol, we have submitted the draft proposal to the Stakeholder Council and the Supervisory Board for their comments. We received no comments there. On top of that, we have also presented this proposal to the Due Process Oversight Committee, where they didn't raise any issue that is worth mentioning here. So the final proposal is substantially the same as the version in September, so I will be very brief in explaining it to you. The objective of this project is to align the existing portfolio of GRI sector standards with any topic standard that comes from the projects of biodiversity, climate change, labor, and economic impacts. That is the projects that are now alive, almost alive, because biodiversity is just closed. The changes to the sector standards that will be developed under this project will be therefore limited to the alignment with these new and revised topic standards, because the objective is to ensure consistency within the set of GRI standards. This is a bit of an original project. We were never in a position that we needed to do this type of alignment, so we'll have to develop a methodology for this, that it needs to, of course, adhere to due process protocol. It should be scalable, so it can accommodate an increasing number of sector standards and the frequent revision of the topic standards, and it should be agile, so the sector standards can be aligned before the effective date of any new or revised topic standard. So this methodology will be tested in the next slide, please. This methodology will be tested in the pilot activity that we will implement in 2024. This will be to align the 3 existing sector standards: GRI 11, oil and gas, Sector 2021, GRI 12, Coal Sector 2022, and GRI 13, Agriculture, Aquaculture, and Fishing Sectors 2022. These 3 sector standards will be aligned with the revised topic standard for biodiversity that you have just approved. So the pilot activity will test and refine the methodology for the alignment. In the proposal that we submitted to you, we have some key elements of this of the way we want to work, which I've summarized them in those 3 bullet points. First, the standards division will propose changes to these sector standards to ensure that they are aligned with the new biodiversity standard. If the proposed changes are considered significant, then the standard division will recommend the GSSB to, if they are not considered significant, we will recommend the GSSB to approve this draft revision and submit it directly for public comment. That is, without the appointment of a technical committee. By in the opposite sense, of course, if they are considered to be significant, the GSSB will then have to appoint a technical committee to revise them. And finally, the Standards Commission will recommend to have an exposure period reduced of only 30 days. Those are the key points of the methodology to align the sector standards with the new and revised topic standards. We believe that this will allow us to adjust the sector standards in a short time. And in the next slide, we have an example of the timeline that we are proposing. This is the timeline for the pilot project of aligning the current sector standards with the biodiversity standard. And you will see that we are assuming a completion in actually a bit less than a year. And this is all the information that I wanted to share with you about this project. Now it comes the approval of this proposal, or any questions or suggestions that you may have. Back to you, Carol.
Thank you very much. Are there any comments from GSSB members on this approach? No, I think everybody is happy with it, Miguel.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have discussed it before, so thank you very much.
I believe it needs to go through approval, although it doesn't have to be a roll call. I believe, but
yeah, okay.
It should be explicitly approved.
Yeah, thank you for that reminder, that prompt. So nobody has raised any concerns with it. We have discussed it before, so I think hearing no concerns, we can take that as approved. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so that brings us then to the close of the public session. Thank you all, and thank you to the team.
Yeah, if I make a brief comment from my end, because this is the last public meeting of the GSB this year. Just from the standards division perspective, I wanted to thank all the GSB members for their efforts, incredible efforts over the course of the year. A big change moment for the GSSB in terms of a change of leadership, new members. We were able to continue to collaborate in the same pleasant, constructive, and very productive way with all of you, which is greatly appreciated. And wanted to say that on behalf of the team. We've also had tremendous change within the organization. We have a growing standard setting function, and we are seeing first results of the collective efforts of the GSB, the standards division, but GRI at large as well, right? We have tremendous opportunity created here to really lead the way on standards setting. So I wanted to just pause, end of the year, reflecting on this, and personally, as well as on behalf of the standards division, thank all of you. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Bastian, and thanks for all your efforts to ensure a collaborative approach, both with the GSSB and your own team. And it is a big work commitment, and So thank you to everybody, because you're all here as volunteers. So thank you for that. So with that, I think we can close the public session and move on to the private session, please, Gillian.